The rumble of Jack's Harley echoed across the empty highway as he rolled toward a lonely red light outside a forgotten diner. Heat shimmered off the asphalt, and the smell of diesel and sun-baked pavement hung thick in the air. Beside him, a gray sedan eased to a stop. It was the kind of car nobody would remember twice. Jack glanced over casually, but something inside the passenger seat caught his attention. A teenage girl sat frozen beside the driver. She looked pale, hollow, terrified. Her eyes stared straight ahead at first, but slowly she turned toward him. For one chilling second, their eyes locked. Her lips barely moved. "Help me." A cold shock ran through Jack's chest. The driver noticed the exchange immediately. He turned his head slowly toward Jack with an emotionless stare that felt wrong in every possible way. The girl instantly looked down at her lap again like a frightened prisoner. The light turned green. The sedan pulled away calmly. Jack sat frozen for half a second, trying to convince himself he imagined it. Maybe she was upset. Maybe it was nothing. But deep down, he knew better. Years earlier, during his time in the military, he'd learned how fear looked when someone was trying desperately to hide it. That girl wasn't nervous. She was terrified. Without another thought, Jack twisted the throttle and followed. He stayed several cars behind the gray sedan as it moved east down Highway 17. The ride stretched mile after mile through empty farmland and dry hills. Jack kept replaying the girl's face in his mind. Then he called 911. "There's a girl in that car," he told the dispatcher. She mouthed the words, "Help me." The dispatcher sounded skeptical at first. "Did you witness a crime, sir?" "No," Jack admitted. "But something's wrong. I know it." He read off the license plate while keeping the sedan in sight. The dispatcher informed him the car belonged to a man named Frank Miller. No warrants. No alerts. Nothing suspicious. But Jack refused to back off. The sedan suddenly exited the highway into an isolated gas station. Jack parked near a delivery truck and watched carefully. Frank stepped out and calmly began pumping gas. The girl remained motionless in the passenger seat, her head lowered. Jack considered running over and pulling her out right there. Then she looked at him through the mirror. Very slightly, she shook her head. "No, don't." Jack froze. She was warning him. Either Frank was dangerous, or she feared a failed rescue attempt would make things worse later. A minute later, Frank climbed back into the sedan and drove away again. Now Jack knew for certain this wasn't in his imagination. The girl was counting on him. He continued following while updating 911 every few miles. The dispatcher promised officers were nearby, but the state line was getting closer, and Jack feared once Frank crossed it, the girl might disappear forever. Then flashing lights suddenly exploded behind him. A state trooper pulled him over. Jack's stomach dropped as the gray sedan continued disappearing into the distance. The trooper, Sergeant Evans, approached carefully. "Sir, we received a report that you've been harassing another driver." Jack realized immediately what happened. Frank had called the police first and painted him as the threat. "That man kidnapped the girl in his passenger seat," Jack said urgently. "She asked me for help." Evans remained cautious. "Did you see a weapon?" "No." "Did she try to escape?" "No." "She's scared." Jack explained everything. The red light, the terrified expression, the whispered words, the warning at the gas station. For a long moment, Evans studied him silently. Sweat rolled down Jack's forehead beneath the heat of the afternoon sun. Finally, she made a decision. She grabbed her radio. "Dispatch, I'm initiating a stop on the gray sedan eastbound on Highway 17. Relief flooded through Jack as Evans sped away. Minutes crawled by like hours. Then far down the highway, red and blue lights appeared. The sedan had been stopped. Jack could barely breathe as he watched from the shoulder. Another police cruiser arrived moments later. Suddenly, the driver's door flew open and Frank bolted. He didn't get far. Officers tackled him onto the pavement within seconds. Another officer opened the passenger door carefully. The girl stepped out, trembling violently as a blanket was wrapped around her shoulders. She was alive. She was safe. Jack leaned heavily against his Harley, overcome with relief. A deputy soon escorted him to the scene. Up close, the girl looked even younger than he first thought. Tears streamed down her face as paramedics checked her over inside Sergeant Evans's cruiser. Evans approached Jack slowly. "You were right," she said quietly. "Her name is Maya. She was reported missing 3 days ago." Jack stared at the squad car in disbelief. Evans continued grimly. "That man is her mother's ex-boyfriend. We found duct tape, zip ties, and a tarp in the trunk. He was taking her to a cabin across the state line. Jack felt sick hearing it. One red light. One look. That was all that stood between Maya and a nightmare nobody wanted to imagine. Moments later, a car raced into the scene. Maya's mother burst out crying hysterically and ran straight toward her daughter. The two collapsed into each other's arms beside the highway while officers quietly turned away to give them privacy. Then Maya looked toward Jack. She pointed at him with trembling fingers. "He's the one," she whispered through tears. "The biker. He saw me." Her mother wrapped Jack in a fierce hug, sobbing her thanks into his leather jacket. In the months that followed, Maya slowly rebuilt her life through therapy and recovery. But the terrified girl in the gray sedan didn't stay broken. She became stronger. She finished school, went to college, and dedicated her life to helping abuse victims and missing children. Sergeant Evans changed too. The case became one of the defining moments of her career. She later helped train officers to recognize silent signs of distress and trust credible instincts even when evidence seemed thin. And Jack, the man who simply refused to look away, became something unexpected. A local hero, but he never liked that title. Whenever reporters praised him, he always said the same thing: "I just paid attention." Still, the experience changed him forever. He eventually sold his motorcycle repair shop and created a non-profit organization that trained truckers, bikers, and highway travelers to spot signs of trafficking and abuse on America's roads. Every year after the rescue, Maya, Sergeant Evans, and Jack gathered together for a simple backyard barbecue. No speeches, no cameras, just gratitude. One summer evening during their annual gathering, Maya's father raised a glass. "To the people who see," he said emotionally, "and the people who don't look away." Everyone raised their drinks together. Jack looked across the yard at Maya laughing freely under the setting sun and realized something important. Heroes aren't always fearless. Sometimes they're just ordinary people who trust their instincts when everyone else would ignore them. Sometimes courage is nothing more than following a gray sedan for 47 miles because a frightened girl silently asked for help. And sometimes saving a life begins with simply noticing someone else's pain.